My name is Blake Alexander.
And my name is Chase Carter.
How are we doing today?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. This is going to be a great show today because we've got our second interview right now. His name is Richard Fierce. It's an author for the first time, and I think this is really good because both me and you really enjoy fantasy novels, right?
Yeah, fantasy.
So what's one book straight off the bat you can think of that you really enjoy in the fantasy world?
Well, when it comes to fantasy, of course, fantasy is a big sweeping genre. Of course, we got the Lord of the Rings, which is very special to me because it's sort of the great epic of the English-speaking world. I also like the ones of the anthropomorphic kind, particularly the one with talking trains. So yeah, I am a big fantasy lover.
I think that two for me, just the ones that I've read that I actually remember reading. There's three. Harry Potter, obviously, is one. I've read all 8 books, if you want to count the 8th one. There was The Children of Blood and Bone was one book I read, which I really enjoyed. It had a fantasy thing going on, too. The last one, I think, for a little while, I was reading Percy Jackson, which I really enjoy. You know, that's kind of an American Harry Potter. Some people like to call it that, but I thought that was a really fun series. But getting into our author today and the book that he wrote, which is called The Scale of the Dragon, Richard Fierce is a distinguished author renowned for his contributions to the fantasy and space opera genres. His writing journey commenced in his childhood and took a notable turn in 2007 when he entered the realm of published authors. We're not going to spoil too many details because we obviously did a whole interview, and we're going to roll the clip right now. So I hear that your home represents a zoo a little bit. You have quite a bit of pets. Is that still going on?
Yes, and we actually have a 4th husky now instead
Really?
of 3. So yeah, and we have 2 ferrets.
Two
yeah.
ferrets. Ferrets.
Ferrets.
Like the very long. Like I've seen ferrets before, but those are commonly kept as pets in some houses.
Some, yeah. I always wanted them from when I was a kid because I saw the original Beastmaster movies, and he had 2 ferrets named Poto and Koto, and that's the name of ours. We named them after the movie once, and yeah, they're interesting. They sleep 18 hours a day, but when you let them out, they're super energetic, running around, playing. Yeah, they're fun.
All right. This is the Lift Fest. There's one question that we're asking everyone here that encompasses this entire day.
Sure.
If you could have a book based on yourself, your life, your experiences, what would the title be and why? That is the question we want you to think about that we're going to ask you at the end of the show. If you have it now, you need some time to think about it. That's the whole point of this whole day today. So, you want to get started, Chase?
Yes. Can you tell us more about your journey as a writer from when you started writing as a child to becoming a officially published author in 2007?
Sure, yeah. So, little backstory. When I was young, I actually hated reading. I didn't like reading.
Really?
Yeah.
I've heard that some people whose profession they get into, they end up hating it as a kid. I've heard that before.
Yeah. So, well, when I was in school, you had to read a book and then you had to take an AR test on it and all that. I don't know if they still do that, but and you'd have to go in the library, find a random book, and and everything that I picked up, I didn't like. Didn't like them. Hated it. Hated reading. And a friend of mine, this was high school by this point. A friend of mine, his mom was like, "I find it hard to believe you don't like reading. I think you just haven't found what you like." So she gave me a fantasy book and was like, "Read this, and then tell me if you didn't like it." So I read it. It was amazing. I loved it. So I just devoured everything that was fantasy that I could get my hands on, and started getting my own ideas for stories, and started, just writing little short stories and things like that. And then as I, became an adult and got older, I was like, you know what? I have a book that I wrote that was finished, and my wife was like, "It's really good. You should publish it." So that was the first one that got published. It was called The Last Page. It's a fantasy. It's a short novella, and it's about basically a villain origin story. And so that was my first one, and it's kind of how I got into it. Was like finding a genre that I liked to read when I had not liked reading up to that point. Yeah.
So what fantasy books were you reading when starting out?
One of the books that was given to me was it was a Dragonlance novel, and it was actually the 3rd in the series. It was a little confusing when I started it because there's 2 books before it, and I don't think she realized she gave me the 3rd one. But it was Dragons of Spring Dawning. It's 3rd in the series, and it's from, I think it was published in the 80s. By Margaret Wise and Tracy Hickman. They're kind of like a power duo in the fantasy genre. They were part of TSR, which was the creator of Dungeons and Dragons. So they wrote novelizations of campaigns that they had created for D&D, and that's kind of how they got their start. So, yeah.
Were you a fan of D&D growing up? Did you ever get into that kind of thing?
A little, yeah. I played Magic: The Gathering more than anything else. When I was in high school, I was big into that. I did play D&D a little bit, not a ton, and then like video games like Assassin's Creed, Halo,
That kind of
classics.
thing.
Yeah.
All right. So we've already got a good rundown on what inspired you to become a fantasy writer. So when you were first starting out, we do have one of your books here called Scale of the Dragon, which is supposed to be your most popular book. You want to tell us a little bit about that? We do know a little bit, but what can you tell us about how that came about, your inspiration for writing it?
Sure, yeah. I had just finished a series prior to writing this one, and I was kind of trying to figure out what to do next, what to work on next. And I was in my office, and I was just kind of like spinning around in my chair, like brainstorming, like what idea do I want to go with next? And because I had a couple, I joke authors are we have more story ideas than friends, so so you have a ton of ideas usually, and I was like, which one do I want to pick up and run with? And as I was like kind of turning in my chair, I was like, you know what? I just got an idea for something completely new, like different than what I had already written down. And I was like, a girl who has a dragon scale embedded in her leg, and it's a curse because it gives her the ability to sense when dragons are nearby. And dragons in this world are not intelligent. They're fierce animals, just like, a lion or a tiger. And but that's what they think. Turns out that's not the case at all. Dragons are intelligent. And that dragon scale that's in her leg gives her the ability to also speak to dragons. And she finds out, as the story goes, that dragons are not mindless creatures. They're intelligent, and there's a lot more history between humans and dragons than what people know or remember from the past.
So your main character is called Mina, correct?
Yes.
And you describe her as being a bit of an outcast. So I'm guessing that the connection between that is that Mina herself is an outcast. The dragons in society are seen as almost outcast or shunned by humans, right? But she's got that special connections to the other side that most people wouldn't understand.
Yeah, so she's an outcast because she has the dragon scale in her leg, and because it's known that she has the curse of being able to sense when dragons are nearby. And so she's a slave to a king, and he uses that ability to hunt dragons for sport. And so she's a slave, so that's kind of like, outcast. And then also just she's got this gigantic dragon scale in her leg.
Oh, it's giant. I thought it was like a small, like little mark that people could see.
No, it's a full scale, yeah. Takes up the majority of her thigh.
I see. So it's very like scaly, just like all down the thigh.
Yep, it's very
All
pronounced.
right, I can see why that would get on, why people would pay attention to that.
Right, yes. And so she, she's like, that's why she's an outcast, those two things. And then she is being used by the king to hunt those dragons for sport. And the king, there is the magic system in this world. There's people called runesmen. So a king is the only one, or a dominion lord, I call them, but they're basically like a king. They're the only ones who are allowed to use magic, basically. So nobles only. And the way they use their magic is as they build their army, they have people who are stronger than others, like naturally they're just strong. So they get a rune for strength. And then that king can use that rune to pull the strength from his men and make himself strong as 20 men, 30 men. And that's why he hunts dragons for sport. He has the strength. He can pull that strength from people. He can pull the speed from his people, be able to see farther, run faster, do things like that. Gives him an edge on his abilities by pulling that power from his people. And when he does that, the people who he pulls that strength from, like if it's strength, they collapse on the ground because they can't even hold themselves up. They become slow if they have the speed rune, things like that. So they're called runesmen, and basically he has an army of these people, and he uses those to be able to hunt dragons for sport. Gives them the strength and power in order to take on a dragon, because dragons are massive, they're powerful, they breathe fire, they can do things that other creatures can't. So.
Is there anyone that you would ever want to co-write with? Any author, if it's someone that you've met with this club that you've created, is it someone that you've read books from, that you've always taken inspiration from? Is there anyone that you think you'd ever want to write with, living or dead?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have co-written with somebody, but to co-write with someone that I look up to, yeah, there's a couple. Victor Gischler, he wrote the Ink Mage series, top-notch fantasy in my opinion. He would be a good one, I think. And then Margaret Weiss or Tracy Hickman, I'd co-write with either one of those. They're my heroes. So yeah, either of those would be cool.
It's clear you have a wide range of pets. How do these furry and scaly companions play a role in your daily life and perhaps even in your writing?
Yes. So I actually surprisingly, even though I have so many pets, I don't really incorporate animals into my writing much in terms of like dogs or things like that. Dragons, obviously, it's a mythical animal, but so I don't really incorporate them into there. But in terms of like just my daily life, I mean, huskies are high energy dogs. They take a lot of effort to kind of wrangle them together. And so yeah, that's we have a big backyard, so they have plenty of room to run around, so we don't have to do a ton of taking them for walks. But when we do take them for walks, like on the Silver Comet Trail, they will pull you the whole time because huskies are working dogs. They were bred to be pulling sleds, and so just by nature they want to work hard. And so when you take them for a walk, I'm thinking, oh, leisure walk, and they're like, no, let's pull. And so you get blisters on your feet. They'll pull you so hard.
Blisters.
Yes.
Blisters from walking a dog.
Yes.
So it's like that's not walking a dog. That's an adventure. That's a journey.
That's what my wife says.
They're taking you on that Balto adventure.
And my wife's like, this is an adventure. Yeah. So, and then the ferrets, they're just fun to play with. Like I said, they sleep a lot, but when they're not asleep, they attune their schedule to their owners. So like, they'll sleep all the time, but when you're home and when you're in the room, they'll wake up and they'll want to come and they'll want to play. And they play with toys. My ferrets don't steal things, but ferrets generally will steal shiny things or things that make noise, and they'll hide them. So they don't steal anything valuable, but we did, one time we were looking for a bunch of crinkly toys, like dog toys. Well, they had taken them up under the couch and there's like a big pile of toys that they had hidden up under the couch or whatever.
So there's a level of intelligence with these ferrets.
Yes, they're very smart.
That's crazy.
And there's different kinds of ferrets. There's ferrets, and then there's a version of ferrets called polecats. Polecats are actually used in the wild to hunt rabbits. There are people who train them to hunt rabbits. And there's a guy on YouTube, I think. He has those kind of ferrets. They go down into the rabbit holes to drive the rabbits out, and then he has hawks that catch the rabbits, and then he eats the rabbits. That's what he does for hunting. But yeah, they can be used as hunters. They're very smart creatures.
With multiple novels and short stories that you have created, could you give us a glimpse into your writing process? What are your sources of inspiration? And how do you approach world building in your fantasy and space opera works?
Sure. So world building, even though it's fantasy, I want to have an element of realism so that people can relate to characters, and not have to completely suspend their disbelief of like what's happening. So there are things about our world that applies to fantasy worlds, like gravity, obviously, things like that. If you're flying on the back of a dragon, when you get that high up, the air gets thinner. It's hard to breathe. Your eyes get dried out. So there's real world issues that you have to add to the world building of like, how do you deal with that? So dragon riders can wear goggles, or they can cover their face, in their arm while they're flying, things like that. So world building, I look at what are some real problems that would come about from things that are fake, like riding a dragon or whatever. And then also like, I just like to build things that I've not seen done before, like magic systems, and things like that. The hard part about that is, there's a scripture from the Bible that says that there's nothing new under the sun. And that is true. Like anything that you've thought up, someone has already had that idea. They've already done it. The way you make it unique is you put your own spin to it. So, I take things that I think, well, I've never seen anyone do this. Someone's probably done it, but I've never seen it. And then just kind of put how I think it would work, or, whatever, like the magic system with the runes and all that. And so that's kind of how I approach world building, is like, how can I make something unique that I haven't seen before that I think would be cool? but that also has some grounding in realistic real life stuff, so that it's not like so far fetched that people are like, I can't, it's unrelatable, or the characters don't seem real, or whatever, things like that. Some of my inspirations, of course, for the people who I first fell in love with reading their fantasy books. Primarily these days, I read a lot of indie authors, people like me who publish their own books,
Right.
because there are so many talented people out there that you would never discover if you were just looking at traditionally published houses putting out books. And so, yeah, I do a lot of indie reading, and there's so many people who are so good at writing. So, like with anything, you reading or watching movies or whatever, you kind of gain inspiration from what you see, what you read, what you take in, gives you ideas, things like that. So that's kind of where I get inspiration from. I say inspiration comes from everywhere. One of my books is called Dragon Sphere. In this world, there's a silver sphere that that houses the soul of a dragon,
Okay.
evil dragon. And there's a song that has to be played to keep the enchantment on that sphere strong so that the dragon doesn't escape. The idea for that came from a child nursery. When I was working, my wife worked in a nursery at a church when we lived in Savannah for a short time.
Really?
And I was in there helping her out, and there was just this little toy, this little ball shaped thing. It was plastic, had buttons on it, and when you pushed the buttons, it played music. And I was thinking, what if there was something trapped inside that thing, and you had to play the music to keep it in there? And that's where Dragon Sphere came from. Was like, oh, this magical sphere that holds the soul of a dragon, and the magic has to be played periodically to keep that magic strong. And so that's kind of where it came from. It was like just a real life toy that kids play with, kind of inspired a fantasy idea. So, yeah, I say inspiration comes from really everywhere.
All right, I want to turn the discussion to something else that I understand that you used to work in the tech industry for some time.
I do still, yeah.
You do still? So you want to talk to us a little bit about that, what that's been like, what it is exactly that you do in that field nowadays?
Yeah, so originally I worked retail, and then I got out of retail and got into the tech industry. So I worked for a mobile app company. I originally started as a tech support person. And up to this point, I had never done any technical stuff. So it was all new to me. I had to learn everything, learn how to troubleshoot things. There wasn't a lot of help documents already for the company. So I had to learn everything from the ground up, figure out how things are supposed to work. If they're not working that way, why is it not working that way? How do we fix it? Things like that. And so I kind of went through doing that, most of that, created all the policies, procedures for support, tech support. And then kind of became the manager, and then they hired other people to do what I was doing, and I managed them. And then now I'm operations for the company, so I do I manage the billing stuff. I manage our resellers, who are people who resell our product to their customer base. I manage the support team still, but I don't do day-to-day support like I used to. And I kind of wear many hats. I do a lot of stuff. I assign customer leads to our sales reps, things like that. So, yeah, it's very boring in comparison to being a writer, but, pays the bills. So, and the writing stuff is year over year making more and more money. So soon, probably in the next year to 2 years, I could probably do the writing full time and not have to have a day job, as I call it.
I see.
Yeah.
So where do you see yourself maybe 10, 20 years from now as a writer, if that's your main focus point you want to hone in on in life?
In 10 years, this year I started my own small press company, so I'm also publishing other authors as well. So in 10 years, I see probably that being a lot bigger, more authors being published under that company, and of course, still writing my own stuff. I am turning some of my books into comic books.
Really?
I'm turning some of them into gaming modules for dungeon crawls. Possibly 5e expansions for D&D. So yeah, with a book, you can do a lot of things like movies, TV shows,
Of course.
Obviously that would have to be, big budget stuff, but like comic books, things like that, I think that's a lot easier. It's more financially feasible for me. But yeah, so I'm taking books and branching into other avenues like comics, gaming, building board games or card games based off of book series, things like that. And then just building that company up and helping other authors sell books and succeed. So it's kind of where I see my path going. Yeah.
Winning Poet of the Year in 2000 for your poem "The Darkness" it's actually a really excellent accomplishment. Could you share the inspiration behind the poem and how it felt to receive such recognition?
Sure. I wrote that in high school, and it was part of a creative writing class that I was in high school. We had to write a certain pattern of a poem. And so, because I write fantasy a lot, I wanted to kind of like aim it as like a fantasy type poetry. And so it's called The Darkness, and it's basically about a place called the Abyss, which is a place in one of my books, which is not really like hell, but it's kind of like in between. It's a place where like nothing lives. There's no trees or anything.
Just avoid it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. There's nothing there. So the poem basically is just describing that landscape. Like there's nothing there, nothing lives. It's just called The Darkness. And I just submitted around to poetry publishing companies, and one of them was like, "Hey, we want to publish it in an anthology with a bunch of other poets." And so got to be in that. I have a copy of that still at home. And then they also hosted a yearly conference where they would bring authors out or poets out, and some of them would win awards. And so I won Poet of the Year for that poem. Got a gold medallion. It's at home in my office. I also got a trophy, a little thing that has the title and all that on there. So yeah, it was cool. And I was in high school when I won that. So when I won that, I came back and I told my teacher, and she started spreading it around the school. "Hey, we have an award-winning poet here in our student base." And then the local news came out to interview me. I was on local TV. I was in the newspaper. I have a clipping of the newspaper from back then too. And yeah, it was pretty neat. So
So exciting for you.
yeah.
All right. So backtracking to the question we actually originally on the show, do you have an answer for us? So the title, you're based on your life. What would it be and why?
I don't know. It sounds cliche, I guess, but I would say from rags to riches, but not necessarily riches in the sense of monetary. But I mean, I grew up in a family that did not have a lot. There was 8 siblings. I'm the oldest of 8 kids. And there was a time where we were living out of our car in a parking lot because we had nothing. And and now, I left home at 18, moved here. I grew up in Las Vegas, moved here, started my own life, like got a job, lived with a friend, started paying bills, got my own apartment, worked up to having my own place, like my own house, got married. I have kids, I have grandkids now. And so I think back to I come from a very humble beginning. So I'd say the rags and then to riches. And it's not that I'm wealthy, because I'm not, but I'm comfortable. I have a house, I have a family. I don't have to worry about, am I going to eat today? Those times when we had back then. So, I'd say that, yeah.
I see. What advice do you have for young people starting out writing, whether that be fantasy, whether that be something and maybe investigative? What advice would you give to people starting out overall, like you in high school when you were starting out all those years ago?
Don't give up, because you will get a lot of critique and feedback from people who think that they might be trying to be helpful, but they can inadvertently crush your spirit in terms of you wanting to do something like being a writer or an actor or anything else. So don't give up, believe in yourself. And it's a long road, especially if you go the self-publishing route like I did. It's taking a lot of years. I've been doing it since 2007, but it hasn't really actually turned a profit until the last 3 or 4 years. So it's a long road, but it is worth it in my opinion. So don't give up. Learn everything that you can about marketing, about writing, craft, and everything that goes with writing. Everything you can, soak it up and implement it. And just keep going.
And that about wraps up today's show.
That's right, the fellowship has disbanded.
All right, my name is Blake Alexander.
And my name is Chase Carter, and hey, we got a YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.
Well, you heard them here, folks. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel in the link in the description right now. Help us get to at least 1,000 followers if we can. Oh, well, no, you gotta aim high, 1,000. Let's do it.
This is the Blake and Chase Show, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, YouTube Music, Castbox, and others.
Follow and share our show if you enjoyed this episode. And for our YouTube members, subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss an episode. This has been the Blake and Chase Show. My name is Blake Alexander.
And my name is Chase Carter.
Thanks for listening.